go back to work the day after delivering their babies. Frail older persons have to work until they die. So this is obviously not the world that we want, and this is why we are all in this course today, and why we are all working for social protection. So the COVID-19 crisis has made it clear that all societies need social protection systems, both to protect people against the consequences of life cycle risks, such as maternity, ill health, unemployment, old age, but also to be able to respond to systemic crises and shocks. And today, what happens is that recovery trends from the pandemic between advanced and developing economies are deeply uneven. This two-track recovery is now creating a sort of divergence between countries, and this divergence needs to be corrected. Otherwise, it may undermine the trust, solidarity across countries, fuel conflict, and make the world more vulnerable in case of future shocks, future crises. So this is why ILO member states, represented by their governments, their workers and employers organizations, gathered at the International Labour Conference in June 2021 for a discussion on social security. And they strongly recognize the need to build universal social protection, and they gave a definition of universal social protection, and also the need for greater global solidarity. They even mentioned that the ILO should have a leadership role in exploring the design and implementation of a global financing mechanism, such as a global fund, to really complement and support countries in developing the resources needed to finance at least social protection floors. These two thematic areas, universal social protection and financing social protection, are also among the top priorities of the UN Secretary General. In his report, Our Common Agenda, he talks about the Global Fund, he talks about the need to achieve universal social protection. And also, more recently, on the 28th of September, the UNSG launched a global accelerator for jobs and social protection that is really about achieving USP, universal social protection, and closing the financing gap for social protection. So time for action has come. And the good news is that we are all already working on social protection and financing, so we are not starting from scratch. Next slide, Alvaro, please. So what is our vision? I think our vision is three things. First is to expand social protection to those who are left behind, so to achieve universal social protection. This means horizontal extension of social protection. What we mean by horizontal is that everybody should have access at least to basic social protection, and also vertical extension, meaning that more and more people should have access to adequate and more comprehensive social protection if we want to achieve what we call universal social protection, which is about universal coverage plus adequacy of benefits plus protection across the life cycle. So this is the first idea. Second idea is that to close the coverage gaps, to achieve universal social protection, we need higher investments, additional investments in social protection. So we need to close the financing gap. And this requires, of course, additional investments, because today countries do not invest sufficiently in their social protection systems. And what is great is that with this project, the EC-INPA project, you are supporting countries in increasing domestic resources for social protection. You are also working with development partners such as the EU delegations or the World Bank, IMF, etc., to ensure that more international financial support goes to social protection systems. And the third idea is that to achieve universal social protection, we need a systems approach. What is a systems approach? It's building a social protection system based on a national consensus. It's not, the social protection is not the prerogative of one leader. It's really it's a choice of society. So it's very important that all the stakeholders, so the governments, the workers' representatives, employers' representatives, civil society organizations, etc., take part in this national consensus building. Building a systems approach, it's also ensuring that the social protection policies are rights-based, and for that to happen, they need to be embedded in law. So you need to have legal frameworks that really protect the rights of people, their rights to social security. Also, a systems approach means that the social protection systems are not built for the next 6 months, but for the next 50 years. So they really need to be robust and resilient based on proper administration, financial governance, etc. And I think that the EC-INPA project is working a lot on also the robustness of the resilience or the solidity of the social protection system. Next slide, Alvaro, please. So to achieve at least a social protection floor, we need to invest more in social protection. And we have conducted a study that looks at what countries are investing today in their social protection floor, what is the cost of the social protection floor, and therefore what is the financing gap for achieving a social protection floor. And the results are as follows. For low-income country, they should invest an additional 78 billion US dollars per year, which represents a relatively large share of the GDP, 15.9% of their GDP. For low and middle income countries, so here we are talking about 134 countries, they should invest an additional 1.2 trillion US dollar, which represents a lower share of their GDP, only 3.8%. So this leads us to the first conclusion, is that middle income countries can achieve the social protection floor from domestic resources, whereas for low-income countries, it may be a bit more difficult to achieve the social protection floor by 2030 without any additional financial assistance that could come from the international community. If we look at sub-Saharan Africa, where many of you, I guess, are working, today, sub-Saharan African countries, on average, they invest 5.6% of their GDP on social protection, and they should add 8.2%. So it means they should multiply by 2.5 their current investments. Next slide, Alvaro, please. So we need to invest more, and how can this be financed? So as I said, domestic resources mobilization in middle-income countries, and increasing domestic resources in low-income countries, but with additional financial support. When I was talking about the 78 billion US dollar that need to be invested in addition to what low-income countries are investing today. So this 78 billion US dollar is an average, but actually if countries, low-income countries, are implementing today their social protection floor, they will need to invest only $48 billion, and then progressively this will increase until $100 billion. Why? Because when you establish a social protection floor, you cannot establish all the guarantees at once. You cannot both implement health and old age pension and child benefits and unemployment and maternity benefits. It's impossible to implement everything at once. So it's incremental. So you build progressively your social protection floor, and therefore you achieve as a country a maturity after a few years. So the incremental financial needs would move from 48 billion to 100 billion. And we did some, back to these figures are correct, right? But then we were thinking how to finance it. So it could be a combination of domestic resources. This is the blue parts of the bars. It could be also additional ODA. Today, the ODA is very, very low for social protection, so it would need to really increase tremendously. And there has been a lot of discussions on using the special drawing rights of countries. So these are rights that they have as members of the IMF. member states of the IMF to withdraw. They can withdraw. I don't know exactly the technicalities, but I invite you to watch a video that explains exactly how it can work. So when there is a major crisis, the IMF releases additional special drawing rights that give to the central banks and therefore the development banks of these countries additional liquidity that they can use for development purposes. So we were trying to see if we had a big push of special drawing rights right now, plus progressive increase of ODA and a progressive increase of domestic resource mobilization, how it could look like and how could the countries finance this, cover this financing gap. So next slide, please. Okay, so domestic resource mobilization. So there are many ways to increase domestic resources for social protection. There is a book called the Fiscal Space Handbook, and I think there will be a specific presentation by Helmut Schwarzer and Alvaro during the course of this course. So I don't know which day, but on this Fiscal Space Handbook, which identifies 8 strategies to increase domestic resources for social protection. So I will just focus on a few of them. One of them is to address, to improve governance of social security institutions, to address the avoidance of paying social security contributions. Many countries have problems of under-registration of workers, of employers, under-declaration, informal employment in formal sector enterprises, etc. So it's very important to build trust in the social protection system and also to increase the controls so that, for instance, labor inspectorate or social security inspectorate, so that workers and employers are more compliant with social security law. Another way is to extend the mandatory contributory social security to workers in the and to enterprises as well in the informal economy. So we have seen that in a number of countries with relatively high success. For me, one of the best cases is Algeria. That has two schemes. One is for the workers who have already registered companies, workers and employers who are already in small enterprises but that are registered, so they are already they can be self-employed, for instance, but they are already declared. And another scheme is for really the street vendors, those who have no legal entity, they are just selling things on the street, and or having very, very small, tiny workshops. And for this second category of self-employed workers, Algeria has developed a pilot scheme that supports them give them access to social security. So it's a simplified benefit package, largely subsidized. Plus, it gives them also access to skills development, to support to the creation of a proper enterprise, etc. And after 3 years, because it's a pilot that lasts 3 years, they are supposed to be formal enough so that, to be incorporated in the other scheme for self-employed workers, but that are registered. So this type of initiative is very interesting because first you increase coverage of your social security system, and second, you of course increase the resources, the revenues, and the expenditure on social protection. A third area of work is all of you know that, is the reallocation of public expenditure within the state's budget. So moving from investments that are regressive, such as, for instance, through subsidies, to more progressive social protection investments. So this was the case. This removal of fuel subsidies has been done by many countries. Some are good examples, some are very bad examples. Bad examples is like, for instance, Egypt, that has removed the fuel subsidies, but reallocated only 1% of the saving to social protection. A good example can be Indonesia, for instance. Another strategy is to undertake tax reforms. So taxes on the natural resources to finance social protection, or earmark taxes for universal health care, as in Ghana or Egypt, for instance. So we are trying to document all these good practices, and we have a country brief series that I think you should have a look at, and maybe we can add that in the references that are provided to you. So what is clear is that mobilizing more resources for social protection requires active discussions with the ministries of finance to really assess the financing needs and explore realistic, acceptable financing options. So this is what can be done through what we call the INFFs, so the Integrated National Financing Frameworks, where not only ministries of finance, planning, but also ministries of labor, social welfare, health, social security institutions, workers and employers should be involved to really discuss about the financing needs and the financing options. In Mozambique, where such discussions have happened for the past 10 years, I would say, the percentage of allocation of GDP allocated to social protection has increased. So from you can see on the graph from 0.2% to 0.5% in 10 years, and in percentage of government budget, state budget, from 0.6 to 1.6%. This is still very, very low, of course. I mean, 0.5% of GDP is nothing, but it's still a positive trend over the past 10 years, and which allowed INAS, which is the program of social assistance, to double the number of households that are benefiting from this program. Next slide, please, Alvaro. Okay, so we talked about domestic resources, and as I was saying at the beginning, it is important also especially for low-income countries, to complement the domestic resource mobilization efforts with additional international support. This is the example of Kenya, that has, if you can see on the graph, so the green bars are the share, the share of the social assistance budget financed by external partners, and the blue bars are the share financed domestically from the government expenditure. So you can see that in 10 years, Kenya increased domestic financing from 6% to 66%. Of its and the external support dropped from almost 100% to 33%. So this is, I think, relatively. I mean, I don't know in details the case of Kenya, but if you look at this graph, this is what we should aim at. To try to support the creation of domestic resources through technical assistance and an initial push in terms of financial assistance. Next slide, please, Alvaro. Okay, so we talked about domestic resources, international support, and what is also important is to create an enabling environment for domestic resources mobilization on social protection. So here, these examples are happening. It's not wishful thinking. This is happening now. So this is why this crisis is also, I mean, it's a terrible crisis, but at the same time, the international community seems to be moving a little bit. So what has happened in October this year is a major reform of the international tax system. So that will ensure that multinational enterprises, the MNEs, will be subject to a minimum 15% tax rate from 2023 onwards. So this was agreed by 136 countries, and will contribute to reallocate more than 125 billion US dollars to the state budget of these countries. So this amount of money that was completely lost now will be made available, of course, not only for social protection, for many other development priorities, but I think it's a good starting point. I can tell you that in my country, in France, most people say that 15% is not enough at all, but at least it's a starting point. Another major initiative is the debt service suspension initiative, which is a debt moratorium. It's not a cancellation, unfortunately, it's a moratorium. So it's the G20 finance ministers that have that have agreed on a debt standstill in 2020, and this was extended until the end of this year for the time being. And it allows for the postponement of debt repayments from 73 eligible low-income / lower middle income countries. So this initiative, of course, provides more space to these countries to have some fiscal space for the COVID-19 recovery, including for building their social protection systems. A third initiative that is also ongoing is this new allocation of 650 billion US dollar of special drawing rights by the IMF to improve the balance of payments of national central banks and development banks. So the problem is that out of this $650 million SDRs, special drawing rights, only 275 will go to emerging and developing countries, and only 21 billion US dollar will go to low-income countries. So this is very low, actually. If we want to support low-income countries, 21 billion is not sufficient, huh? Because this is a one-off also, right? It's not annual. But what is interesting in this initiative is that it has a solidarity component, because some of the more advanced economies who actually don't need these special drawing rights, they are allowed to rechannel some of their SDRs to the low-income countries. And in this context, France has announced that they will reallocate 20% of their SDRs to Africa. I think it's the only country that has already announced that. This is why I'm citing my country again. The fourth area is to increase ODA. Today, OECD DAC countries, instead of spending on average 0.7% of GNI on ODA, they spend on average 0.3%. Okay, an average hides differences, of course. Countries like Turkey, Norway, Luxembourg, and Sweden, they spend 1% of their GNI, whereas the US only 0.16% of their GNI. So there is a need to increase ODA for all the countries who are below the 0.7%. In addition to that, there is a need to increase the share of ODA that goes to social protection. Today, I mean, according to several estimates, it's between 0.7 and max 2% that goes to social protection. This is really insufficient given the importance of social protection today to rebuild the economies and to achieve the SDGs. Last point, private sector's engagement. This is, I mean, for us at the ILO, the private sector can play two roles at least. One is to honor their legal obligations by, as I was saying before, registering all their employees in the social security system, and not trying to evade the law, to escape the law, etc. So being good employers. This is the first way. Second way, when we are talking about multinational enterprises, global buyers, etc., through their environmental, social, and corporate governance commitments, it's called ESG, they more and more of these multinational enterprises feel that they have a responsibility towards the people that are working in their supply chain or in their distribution networks. It's not only a feeling, it's also a good marketing strategy, because if they can show to the world that they are socially responsible, of course, it's good for their image. Also, two countries, and France and Germany, have established laws, adopted laws on the duty of vigilance, that oblige these multinational enterprises to provide a report on their social accountability. And I heard that Europe is preparing something similar. So we are working in some countries with multinational enterprises or groups of multinational enterprises to support the development of national public social protection systems. Here we are not talking about private insurance at all. It's to support national public social protection systems, especially when the countries are not yet fully committed to the development of these systems, such as Bangladesh. Next slide, Alvaro, please. So we have talked about more investments through domestic resources, international financial support, and enabling environment. But in addition to more investments, it's important also to invest better in social protection systems. What is investing better? For us and for all ILO member states, investing better is investing in line with international social security standards. So we have several international social security standards that provide guidance on how to build your social protection system. One of them is Recommendation 202 that was adopted in 2012, and that I will explain in deeper details, in greater details. So the system should be in line with these standards, and this is how we ensure that we can invest better. And these standards, for instance, they put a strong emphasis on social dialogue between governments, workers, employers, and civil society to ensure that the system is based on a consensus. This is very important for people to understand why they are contributing to a social protection system. These standards, they also put a strong emphasis on the importance of legal frameworks to ensure that we have a proper rights-based approach to social protection, on the importance of financial sustainability of the system, of good governance, of creating a culture of social protection. So all these different elements that make the system robust and resilient. These standards, they also talk about social protection across the life cycle. Here we are not talking about building a scheme for just children or just motherhood. Here we are talking about a system of social protection that includes different schemes and regimes that will provide social protection across the life cycle of people. And these standards, they also talk about leaving no one behind, because they are explaining that it's important to be inclusive of informal economy workers, to have disability, gender-sensitive and disability-inclusive policies, to ensure that also migrants and refugees are covered, etc. So I think these are elements of better investment in social protection. Next slide, please. So as I was promising, I will talk a little bit about the ILO Recommendation 202, just to encourage you to read it. because, I mean, if you're a social protection practitioner or expert, you really need to read this recommendation tool. It's not very long. I'm sure Alvaro is going to share the link, but you really need to read it, because this is at the basis of a rights-based social protection approach. And what is interesting is that this recommendation, you will see when you read it, you try to think about all its articles and principles, you will recognize a lot of things that you already know. So this recommendation puts at the core, of course, the primary responsibility of the state. Here we are not talking about social protection programs that are developed by a UN partner. It's really social protection programs that need to be developed by the state. It's the state's responsibility. However, the system needs to be based on a national consensus that can be achieved through social dialogue. Next slide, please. Also, this recommendation in its principles provides all the ingredients of what do we mean by rights-based universal social protection. So universal coverage, of course, but also adequacy of benefits, ensuring that everybody's covered, non-discrimination, inclusion of people in the informal economy, and also the fact that if there is a law, a national law, people can be entitled to rights, and they also can claim their rights through complaints and appeals procedures. So this gives you ingredients of what is a rights-based approach to universal social protection. Next slide, please. Also, this recommendation talks about the progressivity of building national social protection systems. You cannot, as I was saying, expand coverage for all the benefits, all the groups at once. And also, there is no one size fits all. You can choose different types of mechanisms, such as social assistance, social insurance, or as in the case of Algeria, subsidized social insurance. In blue, you see all the principles relating to financing. So this is very important, because these standards, they talk about financing. How should we finance the social protection system? So what they say is that there should be solidarity in financing. Meaning that, of course, there is solidarity between different groups of population, the rich and the poor, men and women, older generation, younger generation, active, inactive, etc., etc. So financing can be thought across society. And also that the system should be financially, fiscally, and economically sustainable. So this idea of sustainability is key, of course, if you want people to be entitled to social protection. And that the system should be based on sound financial management and sound administration. And I think you are working a lot on this as part of the program. And finally, that there is a need for a regular monitoring of the implementation, periodic evaluation, to really of course, know where we are in terms of the expansion of social protection, but also understand what works, what doesn't, what could be improved in terms of policy making. Next slide, please, Alvaro. And last but not least, it's the coherence. So here, what this recommendation says is that social protection is not an isolated island in the middle of the Pacific, but that it should be thought in coherence with other policies, because it can benefit from these other policies, but it can also contribute to these other policies. One example, for instance, is social protection and climate change. Social protection systems can facilitate the transition to greener economy, but at the same time, they can also benefit from it. So it's very important to look at social protection as one type of policy for inclusive growth and different types of transition of the economy and society. Next slide, please. We are almost at the end of my presentation. So what has happened on the 28th of September, the UN Secretary General has announced this global accelerator for jobs and social protection. It will be implemented by the ILO in collaboration with other institutions. So as the title shows, it's not only for social protection, it's for jobs and social protection, and for the combination of the two. So the idea is to create a virtuous cycle of poverty reduction, jobs rich growth, formalization, and green transition, and what they call gender equal transition. It's not first time I read this gender equal transition, this concept, but this will generate more national revenues and create fiscal space for public investment, including in the area of social protection. So if you look at this graph, well, it's not in the UNSG brief that you will find this graph. This is my interpretation of what is written in the UNSG brief. So you see social protection, USP, contributing, of course, to poverty reduction, health, education, and if combined with other policies such as public employment schemes, vocational training, and support to micro and small and medium enterprises, social protection can, as in the case of Algeria, contribute to the formalization of enterprises, to more productivity, etc. And if combined with a strong push to create green jobs or to create jobs in the care economy, it can also contribute to a jobs-rich growth and to a just transition where women are more actively involved in the labor market, or a just transition towards a green economy. So the idea is really to try to combine social protection with other policies related to jobs and employment to ensure that we have even more impact. Next slide, please. And so in the UNSG brief, they talk about that this accelerator will include 3 pillars. One, it's integrated national strategies and policies. This is more or less the work that we are doing already at national level to accompany the countries in developing their strategies for social protection, calculating the cost of different policy options, trying to finance them through various options, and engaging in integrated national financing frameworks, and also supporting the practical implementation of social protection policies. So the green part, I think we do it more or less, but the idea would be to expand the work that we are doing. The second pillar is comprehensive financial architecture. So here, the yellow part, this is more about this enabling environment that I was talking about, increasing ODA for social protection, ensuring that the SDRs allocations go to the countries in need, creating more partnerships with multilateral development banks, MDBs, continuing the debt relief programs, and engaging the private sector to build national public social protection systems. And then the third pillar is enhanced multilateral cooperation. So this is more a policy-oriented, I would say advocacy-oriented pillar that aims at boosting national commitments, so ensuring that more countries invest more and better in their social protection system, and also boosting international commitments. What is important in this accelerator is that we will need to link the green with the yellow, so to really align the technical assistance that we are providing on policy, financing, etc., with this financial architecture. And today, as you know, ILO, UNICEF, I mean, the UN family in general is following a rights-based approach, whereas some IFIs may not have exactly the same understanding of what is a rights-based approach to social protection. So more dialogue and more discussion need to happen to ensure that we are aligned, and that the financial partners or financing partners really supports the development of national social protection systems that are aligned with our rights-based approach, our international social security standards, so that they contribute to investing more, but also investing better in social protection. So I think I will stop here. I have a next slide, which provides a few links if you want to have a look after this meeting. Voila, a few links to the discussion on the 28th of September and to the press conference. And if you have any question, I'm available. Otherwise, we will go to the exercise. Thank you for your attention. Does anyone has a question, a clarification on the presentation?
Go ahead, Mel. Fantahun.
Fantahun, I saw you took the floor already. You want to ask anything?
Yes, thank you, Valerie, and good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I want to ask that, you know, the social protection financing strategies and approaches that you mentioned are very impressive. But in the face of the global COVID crisis and the international economic crisis following COVID, the supply chain disruption, global supply chain disruption of, do you hear me? I think my network connection is bad.
No, we hear you
Hello?
perfectly. We can hear you, Fantahun.
Hello?
Continue. We can hear you.
Go ahead, Fantahun. Okay, so someone else had left his, I think it was Aristide.
I saw Aristide also, he wanted to come in. Aristide?
Yeah, thank you, Valerie. Hi, everyone. And thanks, Valerie, for the presentation. That was very interesting. I mean, I've worked on social protection in PFM for a few years, and I'm still learning from this presentation. So that was great. It's not a question per se, but I've seen when you talk about investing more, investing better, investing more it's obvious. We have to advocate for additional resources that may come from taxation, that could also come from IDA, that could also come from other international financial instruments, right? Including the special drawing rights. And on those special drawing rights, I was wondering, because I was in a conference not long time ago, where it was obvious that the special drawing rights for low-income countries was too small. That's why we are trying to get some reallocations of the SDRs from some more wealthy countries like France and Germany that agreed to also reallocate part of it to developing countries. So given that SDRs were allocated during the COVID crisis and the needs during the COVID crisis are so huge, especially for rolling out the vaccines and also, taking care of those meeting the needs, the health needs in the hospitals, etc. How do we make sure that we effectively advocate for part of these SDRs to be allocated to social protection? That's not an easy one, right? Despite social protection being one of the main response areas. Right, and the last point is on investing better. It is a bit less obvious on how we can invest better, right? This means that we have to look for more efficiencies. And does it mean that we should start with generating evidence on how the money is spent, where are the leakages, how we can improve, etc.? So is evidence the entry point to invest better? Thank you.
Thank you, Aristide. So maybe I will reply first. So on the how do we make sure that we advocate for more resources for social protection? I think this is a shared responsibility. At my level, I will try, and I think at your level you should try as well. And of course, when you meet your national constituents, the governments of the countries you are working in, it's important that they understand that they also have to try. This global accelerator is exactly about that, is trying to see, you remember the third pillar, which has the top, it's really the advocacy pillar. It's trying to link the technical and the financial and to boost commitments, both from countries, but also from the international community. When you are working in a country, you are part of an EC-INPA project. I'm sure all of you have already talked to the EC delegations of this country, right? This is the EC delegations that are preparing or have already prepared their 7 years plan. This is clearly a very, I would not say simple, but obvious way for you to advocate for more resources for social protection. Similarly, myself, I'm heading the flagship program on social protection flows of the ILO. What I will do is I will talk to all our funders, our donors, so different countries, and ask them how we can link the bilateral financial assistance that they are providing to countries with the technical assistance that we are providing as part of our flagship program. So these are very simple ways of advancing the awareness, no? Investing better, Aristide, is not only about efficiencies. It's much more than that. If you see, go back to the list of guiding principles. In any case, you will have it in the exercise. You have a few guiding principles, you are right, that are about good governance, administration, efficiencies, no? But many of the guiding principles are talking about how to protect all people, everybody, so the universal coverage, the inclusiveness, also how to ensure that if you want to cover everybody, how do you finance the system? Of course, it cannot be individual accounts, otherwise you have all the poor who are and all the informal economy who are left out. So you need to have solidarity in the system. Here we are not talking only about efficiency. So I think the exercise will be, I think, a great continuation of our discussion. I see another hand, but I don't know who it is because I cannot see everybody. Who is the person who is raising the hand? Could you please put your camera?
Yes, yeah. Valerie, sorry, I was disconnected. My question is on the financing part, particularly with respect to developing countries. Despite the fact that even if they commit themselves to universal social protection coverage, the financing part is very critical. And when it comes to some of the solutions you mentioned, like for instance, access to SDR, access to ODA, or overseas development assistance, and debt reduction. Is there the commitment and the willingness from the developed countries side to take these actions? Otherwise, if we if these things do not happen, if the advanced nations, advanced countries do not commit themselves to providing additional ODS and to debt reductions, that will be a problem. I'm saying this holding constant the lack of commitment by developing countries themselves in curtailing corruption and the tax evasions and other measures. So how do you look at this in terms of the commitment of the advanced economies? Thank you.
Well, the examples that we gave in the slide on enabling environment that Alvaro will share afterwards are real examples. This is not, as I was saying, this is not fiction, it's reality, okay? So these are real examples of creating an enabling environment for development. It's not for social protection, it's for development. Now, the question is whether a share of these SDRs, if all the SDRs go to vaccine or a share will go to social protection. We don't know. This will depend on the priorities set by the government. So this is again where your role is so important in trying to promote the, of course we don't, we want the vaccine, but we also want the social protection. Then on this question of commitment has first to come from the developing countries. Otherwise, there will be no commitment from the international community, because all these funds, they go through the national social security systems, the national budgets. So if there is no commitment to mobilize additional domestic resources or to improve the way the public system is managed, there will be no international commitment. So it's really a shared responsibility. Okay, I think I spoke too much. So Alvaro, do you want to start to add anything, or do you want to start the exercise?
No, it's fine. I think it's a good moment to start the exercise. I sent the document just before the session starts. You may find it in your emails if you haven't seen yet. Essentially, the document is one page describing the situation of Croatia, a fictional country, but based on real one. And the notion is, you read that discussion, you will know certain facts about the country, and there are two main questions it asks you to consider. The first one is, what would be a strategy for investing more and better? You just listen to Valerie expose the concept. And the second question, which in some regards is a way to really engage with the first one, is, okay, how do we convince the finance minister of this? Because of course, to a great extent, the concern of this court is trying to get the word of social protection and finance closer. We all speak more similar language. And so that we understand from social protection what are the concerns of finance ministry, and from the side of finance ministry to start understanding the concerns of social protection. So I will create three groups. In one group will be Valerie, in another group will be Celine, and in the other group I will be there to help you guide the presentation. Sorry, to help you guide the discussion. And the idea is to come back to the plenary session in about 20 minutes, and then each group will have a volunteer, I hope, to briefly say what conclusion they came to. So I will open up the breakout room right now. See you soon. Analysis some push. You're shaking me up. Hello. So are you weren't able to go to room 3? So I'll try to send you a list for the last 5 minutes. How strange. Um, well, let me see if I can. Welcome back, everyone. So thank you very much for participating in the exercise. Are there any volunteer from each group to Valerie, you know if in your group there is a volunteer?
Yeah, Denise is agreed to volunteer.
Okay, so the group has first noticed that this country, it's a bit strange, has a third of the population with children, but at the same time has a fertility rate that is tripping to 1.6 children per woman. So, but at the same time, the first thing that we saw that this country could do in terms of increasing resources to social protection would be taking advantage of the national resources, creating a specific taxation to fund social protection programs. The other one would be the formalization of the informal economy, meaning that the country should be focused more on policies of formalization that would lead to more revenues to the state budget. And then that could lead to more budget for social protection. Also, the fact that the country can take advantage of the fact that has a good engagement of unions and representatives. This can be a good platform for social dialogue and also advocacy, and also a platform for to promote policies for formalization. I think it also would be very important to look at the compliance of social security contributors, particularly to the fact that this is a country where we have a lot of elderly people. The fertility rate are decreasing. So it is important to invest on social protection and sustainability of the system. And in terms of the pitch for the Ministry of Finance, I think it's important to dialogue in a way and convince the Ministry of Finance that the fact that the country is becoming a rich country because of the national resources, I think it's also very important to look as a social protection as a very powerful tool for stabilization of the society, and also to provide redistribution of wealth. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And being as economy stabilizer as well. Yeah, I think that's it. I don't know if the group members want to add something.
Anyone? Okay,
Yep.
okay. Very good, Denise. Anyone from Celine Group? I saw that you share some notes.
Sorry, yeah, I shared some notes in our group. There were but Patience has also kindly volunteered, agreed to volunteer. So Patience, I think you have time to take the notes. Otherwise, I just send them to you on your private team chat as well.
Okay, no problem. I can use them. I think has sent, just to quickly report. Yes. Thank you so much, Celine, and thanks to the group. I think I can quickly give a brief of how the discussions went, and then the group members can add. So the first thing that we looked at was to look at the possibility of creating linkages between the social protection and the infrastructure development projects, because we noticed in the case study that this is a country that is coming from conflict, and there seems to be some commitment within government to promote infrastructure development. And this could also be linked to issues around the skills development, decent work, and possibly use these interventions for registration of workers that might be working in the informal economy, because we also see that quite a large proportion of the population, the working age population, is engaged in the informal economy. We also noted from the case study that the country has a good resource which can be leveraged for provision of resources and finances to go to social protection. So we looked at the option of introducing new taxes on the natural resources that could potentially be used to beef up the financing to social protection programs as the country is emerging from the conflict and building back. We also looked at the use of leveraging on the potential of the private sector. We noted in the case that there is a population that is considered rich, and we thought that this could be leveraged in terms of introducing some taxes to the sector, to the private sector, that could potentially go to finance social protection, and also just justifying it with the fact that it's a contribution and it's bringing the redistribution of resources and creating that solidarity and reducing the inequalities within the population, as the resources are being also be benefiting the people that are considered poor and vulnerable. We also, I think, agreed quite extensively on the issue of formalization of the informal economy as a way of expanding and ensuring that there is already a resource that could be used to finance social protection through the introduction and expanding the contributory schemes through social insurance schemes targeting at those people that are working in the informal economy. Because this becomes, I think, in maybe a conflict, a country like that is building better, it becomes, quite a more feasible way of engaging and ensuring that there's an internally resourced domestic resource going to the extension of social protection system. We also looked at the issue of expanding the social protection system broadly, because we noticed that the case also has indications of a fragmented system. So we thought ensuring that there is a comprehensive system that tries to provide for different contingencies and benefits for the different target groups and the vulnerable populations would be a good way of investing better in social protection to bring coherency and efficiency use of resources as well. We looked at also the subsidization of the social protection for people that have low capacity as a way of also to say, as they are being built up, maybe government should consider in the long run as a way of progressively introducing social protection to increase, the contribution and financing to social protection by ensuring that everybody is somehow contributing to the pool of resources that will go to the implementation of the social protection programs. And we looked at also the issue of, promoting the care economy and the fact that this is work, and to see how it can be harnessed and also leveraged in terms of being brought on board on providing the social protection and resources to the sector. I think we didn't have much time to discuss the second part, but I think one of the issues that maybe we could propose is the issue of enhancing the advocacy and also just providing and proposing to the minister that there's potential to progressively realize the extension of the social protection system in view of the fact that there's already some resources, potential avenues for resources that could go to the development of this comprehensive system. Thank you. I submit. I hand over to maybe the group can also add. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very complete. We are over time. So I don't know if Vishal would like to say a few words. It is always a disadvantage to go there.
Okay, thank you. I think she already covered everything like what we have discussed. But my observation to the case, it seemed like this government is start for more on rehabilitation phase right now, infrastructure development or something like that. But however, even if we can see like the social protection program is not yet exist in the country, but it seems like a good opportunity that the government is keen, to start up this social protection program in their country. And I can observe that only disability people who are result from the war, that they are more focusing right now, but they are not talking about old people. They're not talking about other target groups like women, or children, or disability people, or other. But when I can see like the minister, she talking about like she would like to gathering all of trade union, all the tuk-tuk drivers, street vendors, both formal and informal economic workers, something like that. It seems like if they're going to develop the national social protection policy or framework, maybe going fast, even if right now there is no policy or guideline yet. But the kins or the trend of the government, if they do like this, I think it's going to be fast. And based on the recommendation of what Valerie just mentioned in the presentation, I think maybe going fast to this government. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vishal. That was very interesting. So maybe some final words are the was just a starting point. The idea is that you will be able to develop further all these ideas over the course. And just a reminder that on Wednesday will be the next session with Celine and a representative of the European Union. And I will leave a few closing words for Valerie. Thank you so much, Valerie, for your time.
Thank you, colleagues, and thank you, colleagues. I don't know all of you, but at least it was great to interact with some of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.